America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the May 13th, 2013 Board of Commissioners meeting. Before we do public participation, I would just like to announce that the item under Parks and Recreation that was under one of the first versions of the agenda for tonight was the administration's recommendations for the Willows and a discussion of those recommendations, and that has been removed from the agenda. We will not be discussing that tonight, so if you're here for that, our apologies. The staff needs a little more time to digest all the information they've gotten and make their comparisons and recommendations. That will be on the agenda for June 10th. So if you're interested in that item, please make sure to tune in on June 10th. Okay. Do we have any public participation of anyone who can't stay for the meeting? Hello, Marty.
Good evening. My name is Marty Costello. Own property up at 236 East Lancaster Avenue, but I'm here tonight for the Radnor Township Memorial Day Parade Committee, announcing that the parade, rain or shine, will be Monday, May 27th. And I hope that as many people show up at our Memorial Day celebration as showed up at the Delaware County Veterans Memorial in Newtown Square dedication on Saturday. Over 5,000 citizens from Delaware County showed up for this spectacular dedication. I also want to announce the Grand Marshal for this year's Memorial Day Parade. His name is Corporal Thomas Strickland Turner, a World War II vet and a Montford Point Marine. For those who don't know, the Montford Point Marines were the colored Marines during World War II as the nation's military was segregated. But what's more spectacular about Mr. Turner is he's now a Congressional Gold Medal recipient. Just like the Tuskegee Airmen a few years ago that were standing right here before you, the Montford Point Marines were awarded by Congressional Act 2447 and S-1527 and approved by President Obama, received this award in June of 2012. And to say that Mr. Turner is very proud of this is an understatement. He's also a member of Post 668, American Legion Post in Wayne, which I am a member. And please come out, greet and meet one of our nation's heroes this Memorial Day. And if the good people here for this council and the people at home could read about the Montford Point Marines and what they did for this country under extreme prejudice, I would ask you to. And just give you an example. It wasn't until Saipan when the Marines accepted the colored Marines. Now they're called colored, and this is according to Mr. Turner, because some were black, some were brown, and some were light-skinned. So they called them colored. After the Battle of Saipan, where the black Marines, the colored Marines, were allowed to fight, the general who was in charge of this operation saw them fight, saw them die, and said they will no longer be called colored Marines. They will be called Marines. So please come out and meet this man. Please come out to the Memorial Day celebration. It's a great parade, but the celebration at our memorial, which is across from the middle school, will start right after the last section of the parade ends. I know a lot of you have been there, and but please come this year and meet this gentleman, one of the finest gentlemen you'll ever meet. Thank you. God bless you.
We'll see you there. Any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Dan Skolnick. Just here to remind everyone about there's a blood drive here tomorrow from 7 to 7. It's called the Carol H. Axelrod Memorial Blood Drive in memory of my wife's mother. There are appointments throughout the day, but there's many openings between 2 and 4. Lots of good food, free prize drawings, gift bags. Come and enjoy yourself and have a good time and do a good deed. And I also want to thank Jennifer DiStefano for helping make sure this room is ready for tomorrow. She's been a great help.
Great.
So thank you very much, and come on out.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, Jim Schneller, St. David's. Having observed the Villanova process, which is actually a process regarding an amendment to the zoning code and a sub-amendment to the zoning code, I wanted to comment that a comment was made by one of the solicitors at the last Planning Commission that really topped off a complaint I have about the fact that the township appears to be in some kind of ongoing amendment process involving the development itself. I don't think this is a streamlining. I think this is an improper way for the process to proceed. And it seems to me that thousands of dollars of our township's time has gone into this, whereas no workable amendment is anywhere near in sight, much less is that the right way to go about it. And ultimately, a comment was made that some of the legal staff has rewritten the latest sub-amendment that Villanova has put forth in order that it wouldn't ever appear as spot zoning. So in other words, our legal staff has helped an outside vendor, a vendor not overly crucial to our township, especially in terms of our tax assistance. Yet I'd like to know the figure as to how much time they put into assisting with this amendment with our budget.
Can I just point out to Mr. Schneller that any time that the solicitor or the engineers put into this is reimbursed by Villanova? So Villanova establishes a fund, Jim, and the time that gets put into it, like any piece of legislation, the commissioners, the planning commission, township engineer, township solicitor all have input. And if there's changes to be made, that's the procedure. That's what happens with township legislation. And any time that we put into it gets reimbursed. So there's no cost.
That's great. I'm glad. If I could point out that this ordinance process appears to be making little progress, so that perhaps the township is spending time with engineering and other factions, other sections of government, whereas perhaps a new look should be taken.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any other public participation before the meeting? Okay, we're going to move along. I'd like to announce that we had an executive session immediately preceding this Board of Commissioners meeting tonight. All commissioners were present, and we discussed items of personnel, litigation, and real estate. I'd also like to announce an executive session that preceded our May 2nd meeting, 2013. We discussed items of personnel, litigation, and real estate again, and all commissioners were present except for John Nagel, John Fisher, and Jim Higgins. Next, we are going to have a motion from someone to approve our minutes.
Approval of the minutes for the meeting of January 2nd, 2013, reorganization and regular meeting.
Do we have a second? Any comments from the commissioners? Any comments from staff? Any public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, we have a certificate of recognition.
Excuse me, Bill, did you say January 2nd?
7.
7th.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Well, we have two, there are two,
I thought I heard him say reorganization and January 2nd. Is that not what you said? Bill?
second, yeah.
No,
January
no,
7th.
no,
So
no.
both of
January
them are
7th was a reorganization and a
It was
regular
both.
meeting.
I thought we were passing both.
Yes.
Well, the January 7th minutes have an error that I think is a little more than form. It's on the last page. Motion authorizing to set the 2013 meeting dates. Commissioner Spengler moved to approve, and seconded by Commissioner J. Higgins, with the removal of February 18th, 2013 Special Board of Commissioners meeting. We need removal or approval?
No, removal because Villanova had a game that night, so we removed it.
Okay,
All right.
okay, sorry.
All right.
And then in the next entry, which is the award to the Board of Commissioners from the Township Manager. The last line, we have department heads and finance department for their handwork. I think we mean hard
Hard
work,
work.
don't we?
Or handiwork, hard work?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
What do we want to do on this?
I don't think we need, yeah, that's
It's
just a
just
typo.
wording.
All right.
We don't need to redo it.
Jennifer will make a note of that and correct it.
But good catch. All right. Next, we're going to present a certificate of recognition to the Chester Valley Sportsmen's Association and the Tredyffrin Police Department for the annual Youth Trout Derby event that they hold at Sawmill Park. So if I could, I'd like to invite John DeMeo from the Tredyffrin Police and Steve Grabuski, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, from Chester Valley Sportsman Association on up.
They have another gentleman with them? I don't know.
Mike Rosas is here as well. He's the club president.
Okay, it looks like I left someone out. This is Mike, what was your last name? Roskis. Roskis, it's nice to meet you. So this recognition is for an event that's held every year at Sawmill Park. It's a youth trout derby where we invite, these organizations invite our youth to go fishing at the beginning of trout season. This is the 16th year of the event. It's very successful. It's looked forward to by many, many people. This year there were over 200 kids at the event, which is quite amazing. And children from ages 5 to 13 participate, and they cast their rods and fish, and they win trophy and prizes, and it's really a great thing for our community. So we wanted to express our appreciation for running this for 16 long years. And if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and read these plaques into the record so everyone can hear. This is presented to Steve Grabuski and his colleague of the Chester Valley Sportsman Association. And it says, Radnor Township and the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners present this certificate of appreciation to Steve Grabuski of the Chester Valley Sportsman Association in recognition of your time, your effort, and your dedication to the annual Trout Derby event in Radnor Township Sawmill Park. Thank you very much. And this next one is for John DeMeo of the Tredyffrin Police. And it says, Radnor Township and the Radnor Township...
You need the
Board of-
mic.
Thanks, Bill. Radnor Township and the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners present this certificate of appreciation to John DeMeo of the Tredyffrin Township Police Department in recognition of your time, efforts, and dedication to the annual Trout Derby event at Radnor Township Sawmill Park. We sincerely thank you for your contribution as founder of this annual recreation tradition that's been taking place from 1996 to 2013.
An example of the T-shirt.
Yeah, do the mic.
This is an example of the T-shirt we hand out to all the youth that come every year. Just kind of spells out Chester Valley Sportsmen's Association. And then on the back, we list all of our sponsors. We have 15 sponsors that donate money to help fund this event every year, and without them, this would not be possible. So without our sponsors, without Radnor Township, this event will not happen. And we thank everyone for allowing us to use Sawmill Park, and hopefully this continues to grow and prosper and be a great event every year. So I brought this on behalf of Chester Valley. I was hoping if maybe you could pass along to Tammy for me, or
I will
you
definitely do
yourself.
that.
It's
Great
really a
looking
great
shirt.
thing, and we thank you very, very much for everything.
Thank you for your hard work.
And
Yes.
thank you again for all that
Thank
do.
you. Appreciate it.
I don't know how many people know, but when this came to Parks and Rec Board 16 years ago, even this wonderful thing that's taken place this long was contentious, and it was only with the Parks and Rec Board really strongly supporting it with the commissioners that it actually took place. There were people who were opposed to doing this, and it's just been wonderful. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity to go out there and watch, but when these kids catch fish, yeah, the light in their face and their eyes when they do is just wonderful. Makes it all worthwhile.
All right, thank you again. Okay, next we're going to move on to our consent agenda. We're
I'll
going
move
to
the approval of the consent agenda with all the items listed.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give the commissioners a chance to remove anything if they'd like. Is there anyone in the public that would like to suggest the removal of any of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, there's been a motion to pass the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second that. And this is for Resolution 2013-62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 68, 70, and 67.
You are correct.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All 8 items pass 7-0. All right, let's move on to the committee reports. There's nothing under Parks and Recreation. Commissioner Nagel, do you have anything you'd like to?
Just that we had another very successful township event this past weekend, yesterday, in fact, with this, what do we call it, truck garden? Truck zoo. Unfortunately, I was not able to be there, but I've had feedback from several people about what a great time it was. The opportunity for all the little kids to climb all over this equipment was really appreciated. Thanks to the staff.
Okay, moving along to Personnel and Administration with Commissioner Fisher.
I'll move to approve Resolution 2013-73, amending the 2013 Radnor Township wage schedule. The amendment is to cover a part-time position in the Recreational and Community Programming Department. And this pay increase was subject to a merit base increase, and it was budgeted for in the 2013 budget.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, we'll move on to Finance and Audit with Commissioner Kevin Higgins.
First item on the agenda is the acceptance of approval of a set of disbursements identified as 2013-4C, 2013-4D, and 2013-5A, totaling $875,776.85, which have been approved by the respective departments and the finance head and are within our 2013 budget limits. So I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Staff comment?
I just wanted to ask one thing. There was a invoice from a firm for the valuation of properties. Was this as a result of someone challenging their assessment? Are you familiar with it?
I'll have to look that up, Commissioner, and let you
That's what it
know.
appears to, because it mentions the school district's attorney. And,
Was it Coyle Lynch?
yeah.
Yeah, typically, I'll put you on the spot, John, but, no, whenever there is an assessment challenge, if the school district does it, that is their firm, the township pays our share of the challenge, and that distribution of the cost is based on the millage between the two entities, so that would be roughly 12% of the cost paid for by the township, and that comes up from time to time, and I know they make Mr. Rice's office aware of when they're doing those. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is ordinance 2013-05, the authorization for the issuance of $18,600,000 of general obligation notes for the payment of the swap termination and the advance refunding of the Series 2004 bonds. Bill, do you want to provide any explanation? I have one simple question after your explanation.
Well, I'll tee it up, and then I'm going to turn it over to the folks that helped us sell the deal today. This goes back to, if you recall, the swap termination agreement that the board authorized back in April. This will provide the funding to pay that. In addition to paying for that, this also, given the interest rates and where they're at, this gives us the opportunity to refund the 2004 bonds and realize some savings on those bonds. The particulars I'll leave to our bond counsel and underwriter, which I'll introduce here momentarily. But in terms of what you're looking at and what was included in the packets, a copy of the bond ordinance was included in the packets and on the website with blanks in for the amounts. The reason behind that was the bonds themselves were priced just today. So what we've included in the back of the room are the final copies with the numbers included in them, and copies were given to the board members, and we'll make sure that the website is updated as well. as those are pretty fresh off the press. So at this point, Commissioner Higgins, I'll address your question, and then, or perhaps maybe it'd be more appropriate to have Suzanne Mays, who's with Cozen O'Connor. She's here tonight, as well as Michael Wolf, who served as
You
the
might be
township
able, it's a
underwriter.
pretty simple question.
Okay.
The outside end date of the payments is aligned with the previous issue, that we're not extending the term. If I'm asking I may not be asking I think you understand my question.
That is correct. We kept the maturities the same.
Okay.
The
So-
04 bonds would have matured in 2034, and these will mature in 2034.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. I'm good with it.
So if the board will allow us, I think at this point, we'll turn it over to Michael, who'll give a brief presentation on how we did in terms of the numbers, and then Suzanne will touch on the legal aspects from the township's perspective.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Wolf from the firm of Bending and Scattergood, and it's been a year since I stood before this group the last time. And I believe Mr. Higgins asked a very similar question a year ago, and by form, we do not tend to extend the maturity beyond the normal expiration date. That would be cheating. So we always keep it within the silo that it was originally issued. I'll be speaking to you tonight from the thin white document in front of you, which is called a note purchase agreement. And the very first thing you'll notice on the cover is that although we advertised for $18.5 million, we were able to complete all the transaction today for $18.21 million. So we need fewer bonds than we're advertised for. If you'll indulge me just for a minute and turn to the back, the last few pages of the document in front of you, it's my pleasure to again mention the Moody's rating, which is the starting place for all bond issues. And within the last month, we were reviewed by Moody's again, a year after our last time, and they awarded the same AA1 rating that we received a year ago. And they had some nice comments to say about the township's financial health, which are included in here. And if you haven't seen it or read it, it's kind of like receiving your child's report card, and it's an excellent report card. I'll just summarize. The AA1 rating reflects the township's large and affluent tax base, satisfactory financial position, and moderate debt burden, stable tax base with above-average wealth levels, satisfactory financial position. So you can go and read more, but by Moody's reckoning, the township's doing the right things. On a personal note, I will tell you that I sat in on the conference call with Moody's, as I always do, and really, Moody's has no chance against your staff. They barely get the question asked, and the answer is coming rapid fire. They can barely type the answers quickly as they come, and there was no question Moody's could ask, which the township staff wasn't prepared for.
Michael, if I could just interrupt you, because there's one thing in here that I just wanted to call out. First of all, I was
So you
thrilled.
have read your report card.
And of course I read it. It's a good report card. It's on my refrigerator.
Are you going to buy the township ice cream?
Oh,
Like you
exactly.
would if it-
They divide their report up into subcategories, and one of them is about our debt position. And I just wanted to call this out because I know that our debt burden is something that makes some of our residents very uncomfortable because it's a big number. And I know that some of our residents get very, very uncomfortable and get agita about how much debt we have and how that might affect our rating in the future. So I just wanted to read the very first sentence of this assessment of our debt burden in giving us this rating. And that is, Moody expects the township's debt burden to remain manageable despite a slow amortization schedule and plans for potential additional debt. So Moody's is very comfortable with our debt burden and with our plans and what we're doing. And I just call that out because I know there are a lot of people who have that in the back of their head, that we'd be healthy if we didn't have so much debt. And we're healthy even with the debt we have.
The other thing is, since you mentioned it, I think I'll expand on it a little bit. Moody's is only happiest when you have 50% of your debt paid off in 10 years. And Radnor doesn't pay off 50% of its debt in 10 years, but that's because you're financing assets with a much longer economic life. So the plan that Moody's would favor is painful for the taxpayers. So just keep in mind that you serve various masters, not just only including Moody's and their anxiousness for you to be out of debt. Okay, I think you have a good match of, liabilities to economic life, and you've paid attention to that. Right in front of this rating, on an unnumbered page, is a show of all 9 ratings that you could have received, and you're one from the very, very top. You're not a AAA. There are only 5 AAAs in Pennsylvania. I did speculate, though, that when some of the very exciting development projects, which are on the drawing board, when some of those are finished, we might consider inviting Moody's back, because I think they'll be very impressed when some of these things finally reach fruition, no matter how the details turn out. Exhibit G is a graph with 2 lines. I'm sorry I didn't give it to Bill. But look at that. It's there. You see what I mean? I just gave it to him 5 minutes ago. A graph with 2 lines. The line at the top, in red, is the interest rates you were scheduled to pay through 2034 on the series of 2004. And I've been looking forward to getting rid of those 2004 bonds since about 2006 or 7. And tonight we finally have the opportunity to replace that red line with the lower line, which on my page is green, but on the screen looks kind of gray with the squares. We're replacing bonds that have an all-in coupon of about 5% with the lower bonds that are 3.14%. The savings today, just on the Series B bonds, just on the refunding of the 2004, is $1.8 million, or 12.7% of the refunded principal of $14.81 million. Now, for those of you who remember what we were doing exactly this time last year, we were refunding Series 2007. We were struggling to get to $1 million. We almost made $1 million. We made $991,000 of savings. We saved 6.2%. We were happy with that. Look at the comparison tonight. It's twice as much savings tonight, mostly because the bonds have been outstanding since 2004 at substantially higher interest rates. As it is, these bonds can't be taken away from the bondholders until July of 2014, but we're still pulling the trigger now to guard against higher interest rates in the future. And we're going to realize, whereas we realized 6% of principal the last time, it's 12% tonight. And I'm extremely happy about that. There are a few factors which are detailed, which go into the account, like the old bonds from last year were really rear-loaded. These were more evenly spread. There are more of them, et cetera, et cetera. But this has to be considered a successful refunding by all counts. I remind you that GFOA thinks 3% is a good target to set when trying to do an advance refunding. So we're multiple times, 4 times, the GFOA target. I'll skip Exhibit F, and I'll show you Exhibit E, which I think you have in front of you, which is a stacked bar graph of all of the township's debt. And we are doing a few things tonight, but one thing we're doing is we're eliminating that little peak that shows there in 2015. We're shaving that off and making that straight across the top. Right, Bill? Oop. Magic. So what we had was clearly was the slide before. I guess maybe we should go back. This place is high-tech, man. Okay, so that's what we were going to have with that bump up in 2015. That's a little unusual. That was caused by a carve-out of savings when you refunded your 2010 bonds a while back, or in 2010 when you issued bonds to refund prior bonds. You took the savings up front, the last 2 years of which show on that graph. We're now carving that peak off the top, and we're restructuring a little bit while we issue the new bonds, Bill. And so now the dotted line shows what it was going to be, and the bars now show what we're going to have. We're issuing 2 kinds of bonds, taxable on the short end. That's for Series A to pay a termination fee, and we're issuing Series B bonds, which go all the way out from 2020 to 2037. And without getting into too much detail, we did consider various alternatives of how to space this out. There's no right, there's no wrong. We looked at several alternatives, especially regarding the Series A, and we're leaving room there for additional debt service only if you need it, but it's there if you want it. So there was a lot of debate and discussion, which Bill may be able to summarize for you, but this is the majority opinion of how to do it, and this is what we sold today.
Well, if you'd like, if I could, just real quick, since this might be a good time to talk about it, since you teed it up, is as part of the entire process, going back to the decision whether or not to terminate the swap, which we started with the CARFAC group back in December, and then started meeting regularly with the CARFAC group in, I want to say February, which ultimately led to the recommendation to terminate. We continued those meetings even after the termination to evaluate how these bonds would be structured for today's pricing and tonight's ordinance. And to touch on what Michael had mentioned about the different structures of bonds, you'll see maybe the best way to point it out is in 14 and 15, you see where the debt service actually drops off from where it otherwise would have been to being slightly higher than in 18 and 19. That was two different plans on structure. And I will say that the CARFAC group that we worked on was split on the decision. Some were in favor, some were not. But again, it comes down to leveling off the debt payments over the next 6 years, as well as taking advantage of some of the savings on the near term, which come budget time will help address some other funding liabilities that we have in front of us. So that's the 2-minute summary on those
we appreciate the
hours
input.
of debate.
In the end, when rates changed, the difference between the different options was not as much as we expected it to be, but I think the compromise that we came out with is a good one. If you keep working your way towards the front of the booklet, there's details about the each of the series. The Series B is, and then the Series A. The Series B is on page 15. And Series A is on page 14. Even though taxable bonds usually have a higher yield than tax-frees, we kept it short, and the highest interest rate that any of the taxable people got in the longest one in 2019 was less than 2%. So we pushed all those to the front and let the tax-free bonds with the lower interest rates be at the back. I think you'll find page 13 a good summary of the Series A and Series B. It shows that there's $18.21 million altogether, divided into various purposes across the top. And we have, in Series B, we have retained the structure that was in the original 2004 bonds. So there's a portion of the bonds that are dedicated to the township's capital projects, a portion that was used by the Wayne Arts Center, and a portion that was used by the library. We're maintaining that structure so that the savings can be allocated each to each, and each of those categories will receive their fair share of the almost $2 million of savings.
Well, there's also one other thing that you haven't really hit it on the head here tonight. We took a huge risk, or a significant risk. I guess I don't want to say huge risk off the table.
I thought we might have talked about that in the past. But
Yeah, but I want to reiterate that. I mean, we talked about all the great things that happened in the savings, but not only did we achieve savings, we eliminated a significant risk of future interest rates being higher on us when we're not really a financial institution that ought to be taking those kind of risks.
I agree 100%. Everybody, I think, is on board with the fact that we were not in the mood to issue variable rate debt a year from now and having to secure a letter of credit subject to renewal from time to time and worry about a bond that reset every 7 days. Even though on average it's always been better, what about the times when it's not and it spikes? So we're eliminating that and the risk of remarketing a variable rate instrument that would, and we would have that in place potentially out till 2034. So tonight, we give you the opportunity to lock in this deal and make that payment to terminate that swap with your bankrupt counterparty, Lehman Brothers, on July 1st? That's another risk we didn't want to worry about, is who takes over for them, sometime down the road.
I just want to back up to the statement you made before Kevin's comment, that we're retaining the structure of the different uses. Because in the ordinance, there's language that the part of the Series B, the library portion, is being repurposed. So it's repurposed for township
okay.
use.
I'm sorry.
Instead of library use. So, and that's fine. I'm sure there are good legal reasons for it. I don't want people who read this to think that that has any bearing on the commitment we have to fund our library and do the projects that money would have gone for, which was an HVAC redo. But that will come out of our general fund. It will not come out of this bond reissue.
Yeah, thank you. I glossed over that a little fast.
You're talking about Article 30 of the ordinance, Section 30.
I don't know. Let me see. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Well, what I was attempting to get at was that you have all this savings, but by keeping it in the categories that it was, you have a lot of flexibility as to what you can do. But if you want to share your savings with the Art Center, for example, this shows how to give them $103,000 of your savings based on their participation in the old bonds. So it's a little complicated, but I think they'll be looking forward to some debt service relief. That about wraps up my presentation, except for me to say that it's a real pleasure serving my own home township. I travel all over the state doing this. I'd rather do it here, to tell you the truth.
Well, thank you for all your help on this. I, for one, sleep better at night knowing that swaption is now out of the picture.
Me too. The normal thing for me to do is, if there are no questions about this thin document, is to introduce Suzanne Mays from Cozen O'Connor to talk to you about the thicker document, which is the ordinance that was advertised. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Good evening. My name's Suzanne Mays. I'm a partner with Cozen O'Connor and have been serving as your bond counsel on this bond issue. Just a few points. First, I'll just give a brief summary of the ordinance. So the ordinance is the legal authorization that the board would consider and enact, if it so chooses, to authorize the incurrence of the debt, the Series 2013 bonds, which will be undertaken for the purposes that have already been outlined. And it's, fairly straightforward. It has authorization of the project, meaning the refunding program and the payment of the termination fee, characterization of the debt as non-electoral, general obligation debt of the township, sets forth the terms and provisions of the bonds, including a form of the bond. It also, I'm saying bonds, and these are actually styled as notes, and that is a Pennsylvania Debt Act requirement. Because of the cost of paying the termination payment and the fact that you would look at that debt service in conjunction with your new refunding debt service, overall, you don't see a net savings. You have savings on your pure refunding, but you're incurring debt for the termination payment. So in order to bring it within authorized purposes under the Pennsylvania Debt Act, which is what you issue pursuant to, one of the authorized purposes is to go from bonds to notes or notes to bonds, and it's a little bit of semantics. But anyway, that's why we called these notes, so we could fit legally within the Debt Act. So I apologize, I should be saying notes. Form of notes, note redemption provisions, authorization to contract with U.S. Bank as your paying agent on the notes, authorization to redeem the 2004 bonds that you are advance refunding, and then two things that are just not always in your ordinances. One is the repurpose that you mentioned, which is that the township received back some of that original library loan that's not being utilized, and so in order to allow the township to lawfully use that, we actually authorize a new project in the ordinance and advertise that, and then those proceeds, once we have DCED approval, state approval, those remaining proceeds can be used for that purpose. And then the other provision, which appears in section, just give me a second, 31, is reference to the fact that the current thinking is that the township would restate or amend the loan agreement and the note with the Wayne Arts Center to allow it to share in the allocable portion of the debt service savings that are represented by its piece, essentially, of the 2004 bonds. So there's a fairly simple loan agreement and note that exists, and we would just do some rewording of that to bring it current and put, for example, a new debt service schedule on their note that reflects the slightly lower debt service. The ordinance.
And there's no need to do the same agreement with the library because they're not, the money that's left unspent under the 04 notes or bonds is coming back to the township.
That's correct, and my understanding is that the loan agreement, the library note has been satisfied and/or taken care of.
Yeah, the board back in 2010 entered into an agreement which basically undid that piece of the loan agreement and that part of the 2004 bonds.
Okay. The ordinance also authorizes the note purchase proposal, which Mr. Wolf talked about, the thin document. And I do want to call to your attention, the sale was this afternoon, and we were really in a rush to get documents done and get them to you and get black lines run for the working group. There is one small change that we're going to make on page 5 of the note purchase agreement, and we'll substitute a page, but I just wanted to call it to your attention. Benning and Scattergood will subscribe for the securities that are going to go into the escrow in the morning. That hasn't happened yet. So there's a chance that there could be a small deviation in the cost of those securities. So I asked, and Benning and Scattergood was happy to agree, that we put language in that says that if for some reason there would be more than a very de minimis change in the cost of those securities, that at the township's option, they could decide not to move forward. Highly unlikely that that would happen, but I just wanted to retain flexibility for the township since that order for the escrow securities to repay the 04 bonds won't happen until tomorrow morning. Theoretically, the rates could change, and they may change a little, but it should be, I think Michael is confident, it should be very minimal, and you'll see in your sources and uses that you have a rounding number, so it may just affect that rounding number slightly. But just on the safe side.
So you're changing page 5.
That's correct. Do you see the section at the top that's labeled G? Thou shall be more than a de minimis change.
Yeah.
That there's missing from that a lead-in that says the township may terminate its obligations here under if there shall be more than.
Okay.
And it was added to a section inadvertently, and my mistake, that was termination options for the purchaser. So I just want to make it crystal clear that that's a township termination option.
Okay.
So with your solicitor's consent, we'll just substitute a page tomorrow, and it'll read as it was intended to read. My only other comment is that because a portion of these bonds is refunding 2004 bonds that were issued for the benefit of the library and the art center, and for tax purposes, they were actually issued as a slightly different kind of tax-exempt bond, not a governmental tax-exempt bond, but a 501c3, a nonprofit tax-exempt bond, because those two entities operate that way. A small portion of the new deal is being issued in the same way. It doesn't have any impact other than for federal income tax purposes. So for that reason, the township noticed something called a TEFRA hearing for tonight. It's required when the township issues 501c3 bonds instead of governmental, and it was called for 7 o'clock in the context of this meeting. So we would just ask that in connection with your calling for comments, you would just ask, you would say that technically you're now holding the TEFRA hearing, that's an acronym for a reference to a federal statute, TEFRA, and ask if there's any comment on the issuance of the bonds, and then we'll satisfy that requirement.
And you had that advertised?
Yes, it was advertised. It needed to be advertised at least 14 days prior to tonight, and again, that's a federal income tax code requirement, not a township requirement, but we need to meet that as well.
Okay.
Okay? And I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you.
Sorry for the long-winded explanation.
No worries. Thank you for your work. All right, do we have any other commissioner comments or questions?
I have some. Really basic question. What was sold today will generate funds. It's going to the escrow agent, which is U.S. Banking National Association, and that's going to sit for until July 2014. Is that right? And what is the reason for that? Why aren't we moving ahead to retire or redeem the 2004 bonds now?
We would love to redeem them as soon as possible, but they have a call date of 7/15/14. And so we must put the money in special governmental securities, which I'll purchase tomorrow, or I'll subscribe to be purchased on June 13th. And the earliest we can do that is, earliest we can make that mature and take away the bonds is at the call date.
Okay, so the bondholders have, their bargain was to hold the bonds until that date. And
Right. They
the
were
reason
protected until that date. Yeah.
Okay. The reason we're acting 14 months ahead of time, or 15 months, is because of our swaption agreement, our termination
Right.
option.
And we might have been able to delay different parts of it. We might have been able to negotiate a later payoff, et cetera, but the whole time the clock's running and interest rates are changing daily, and we have no comfort that rates will be better than this a year from now, and actually have expectations they could be higher. So with everything ready and the counterparty ready to agree, we are pulling the trigger early, as you say.
Okay. Maybe Suzanne can pick up on some of this. Or one last question for you, Mike. In Section 14, there's a reference to a reoffering premium.
Ah.
Is that Benning and Scattergood's fee?
Not at all. But if you look at sources and uses on page 13 of the thinner document, some bonds, Jim, sold at a discount, but more bonds sold at a premium where buyers today paid more than 100 cents on the dollar or promised to pay more than 100 cents on the dollar. And the township is going to walk away with over $670,000 of original issue premium. So they get to sell fewer bonds because of that upfront payment by some of the larger bondholders, especially at the long end.
Now, just one or two questions. In Section 16, we're agreeing to, in numeral A, or letter A, the certification to the escrow agent of the amounts required to pay the principal and interest on the refunded bonds. Are we going to have any help? Who will make that certification? Our director of finance, or?
Well, that will be contained in an escrow agreement, which will be signed by the president of the commissioners. But the plan is to have a verification by a third-party independent entity. Is that going to be Causey, Demkin and Moore? Causey, Demkin and Moore, that's an accounting firm. Okay. Most of their verification work, which is what we call this when an entity takes a look at what is due and also the maturing principal and interest in your escrow fund, and make sure that what is coming due, the securities that you purchase, are maturing at the times and in the amounts necessary to make the interest and principal payments until the redemption date. We call that verification. That is being done by a third party. Okay. So the township will have the benefit of that report when it certifies as to the amount that's due and also in terms of the securities that are going in to pay it off.
Good. That's a good device to protect
us.
Would the same kind of advice apply? Look at Section 17. Now, this gets a little bit technical. But about halfway down, or a little more, after the words arbitrage bonds as defined in Section 148 of the Code, the township further covenants to comply with the rebate requirements, including the prohibited payment provisions contained in Section 148F of the Code and any regulations promulgated thereunder. Will you be Cozen and O'Connor be advising us on
We draft something called a federal tax certificate, and it's one of the closing documents. Maybe there are 12 closing documents that make up closing: a receipt, a tax certificate, a general certificate where signing officers certify that they are who they say they are. The tax certificate, and there's been one for each of your bond issues, whether Cozen was your bond counsel or another firm, it lays out the various requirements needed to be followed in connection with keeping your bonds tax exempt.
Okay. I think this is my last question. On Article 21, at the very end, we are making a representation that we have not failed to comply with any previous undertakings to provide secondary market disclosure pursuant to U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission rule, blah, blah, blah. Who's going to, how do we know we're doing that?
I believe that's accurate.
Well, yes, that is accurate.
Correct.
And
The township files the continuing disclosure undertakings annually, and that's pursuant to agreements that are in place from prior bond issues. This is a federal securities law requirement.
Okay.
And so the township is really in the best position to know whether or not it's made those prior filings.
And do we have that disclosure agreement as part of the package?
I believe it was in your, either a summary of it or the actual text was included in the offering document. I don't have your offering document.
That's Section 21 says that there is that our president or me is going to execute and deliver a continuing disclosure agreement.
Right. At settlement. I did not bring a form of it with me tonight, but it's a fairly standardized form. And I just don't remember off the top of my head, I apologize, whether we attach the full form of it in the preliminary official statement. We sometimes do that. We sometimes include a summary of it. But again, it's an agreement that you signed last year, and it will look almost identical to what we signed.
We've done it in the past.
That is correct,
Okay.
multiple times. Anytime you've done a bond issue of, probably all of the times you've done a bond issue since about 1995 when that rule came in. And of course, your solicitor, it will also be reviewing all the documents that you're signing in connection with closing, in addition to the fact that bond counsel is drafting them.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners?
Just a quick question. Did we calculate the fact that we have the existing bonds that we're paying interest on? We had the new bonds that we'll be paying interest on for a period of about a year. Did we calculate the cost of carrying that float, carrying those two, and netting out? Obviously, we're going to have this money invested in a very low risk, probably low return vehicle. Have we calculated the net?
The funding, the savings analysis takes into account the refunding bonds and the refunded bonds, not to speak for Mr. Wolf, but yes.
No, my question is...
Do you have a number?
Well, yes. Did we actually calculate the cost of that float for that until we actually refund those bonds to the existing bondholders? Because I know we have a calculation of the total savings, and that's helpful. But I'd like to understand the cost of, basically, the additional cost of waiting.
Thank you. I believe I have it in one of two briefcases. I will take a look and see if I can find it for you within the next few minutes. But if I don't, I'll give it to Bill tomorrow morning.
Okay.
It's one of the calculations that we do. And there is a little bit of overlap, as you point out, but not enough to make us want to wait.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think it'll change my decision. I just, from a transparency standpoint, I think we need to know that. So, thank you.
Okay, any other comments from commissioners? I just want to make one comment, and that is I'd like to recognize and acknowledge and thank the CARFAC for the work on this, because that group of individuals spent a tremendous amount of time thinking through the whole swaption aspect of this and how to proceed. Put a lot of time and energy into thinking that through, and have also helped us form the shape and the way this has come before us now. And I continue to say we're so lucky in this township to have a group of such qualified and expert financial advisors volunteering for us, and the tremendous amount of time they put into it and give us great advice. So thank you to CARFAC, if you're watching at home. All right, is there any staff comment on this? And is there any public comment? We are now entering the TEFRA hearing stage of this proceeding? Seeing no public comment, I will go ahead and, did we have a
Now, Kevin, you
second?
want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2013-05.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have, well, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes 7-0.
Okay, next item on the agenda is ordinance 2013-06, an introduction of it, establishing another post-employment benefit trust and fund. Bill, you want to provide a simple explanation? And then I have a question either for, I guess it's probably more for John.
Sure. What we're proposing here is to establish a separate fund and a trust to oversee any of the assets and then liabilities associated with the township's current post-employment obligations. Right now, those obligations are, as we've talked about for the better part of a year and a half, basically unfunded. The board has, through prior resolutions, established a policy to transfer excess fund balance to help offset some of the liabilities. And for 2011 and 12, we have assets that have been assigned towards this. So this would provide the accounting infrastructure to move those funds into the trust account and then provide the oversight mechanism, which would be the trust, which brings along certain benefits. Some of the highlighted ones are that from an asset perspective, those funds are treated separate from governmental funds. They're treated in the same manner as the asset or the pension assets, which allows them to be invested in a little bit more aggressively in the market and yield a higher return, which in turn lessens the amount of tax obligation needed to fund that if those assets are making more in the market and those market returns are being reinvested back into the activity. From the liability standpoint, the benefits of the trust are that the funds set aside for that purpose are protected to fund only that purpose. So future boards or future township leaders wouldn't have the ability to undo the assets that are sitting there. Instead, those would be secured just for those obligations. So in reviewing this over the last year, we've taken a look at, and when I say we, I mean the administration's been working with CARFAC on this extensively. We've thought about different mechanisms to do this. There hasn't been a whole lot in terms of peers to look at, although I think it's starting to gain momentum nationwide. But it seems that being that the pension was set up in this manner to do just what it is doing, being that this is an obligation that the township has agreed to, that there are obligations we'll have to pay over time, that treating this in the same manner as we do the pension seems to make the most sense, thereby creating a separate fund and trust to do so. So tonight would be the introduction, and we would look to advertise and have the public hearing and adoption then at the June 10th meeting.
John, on page 2, section 62-28, it says the trust shall be funded annually through the budget appropriation process. Is that a commitment or obligation in any way to make an annual contribution of some sort?
It does say shall. But it could be $1, it could be something substantially more than that.
Right, but I'm just recognizing that this is new and we haven't done this for many years. I think it's a good idea, but the commitment or obligation to do it annually, I think, gives me a little bit of pause. I mean, I'm okay with if they struck the word annually, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's a policy decision of the board.
Yeah, my inclination would be
you're going to do this on a year-to-year basis, I assume,
right, but I
decide whether to
recognize
fund
that
it or
there may
not.
be a year that the board chooses not to do so. Not that it would be a good idea, but, I think we've lived with this long enough that I don't know necessarily that we want an ironclad obligation. I
Kevin,
don't-
doesn't the ironclad obligation make it so that even if we decide to do nothing or a dollar, that has to be a public discussion? I mean, I
Certainly.
like it for that reason.
So, I
can
think
I,
a dollar's kind of silly,
Yeah,
personally.
it might be, but I'm.
Kevin, this comment brings up a question I had about our funding of this, which may address your concerns. So this document basically says we're going to fund it every year, and all of our payments towards these obligations are going to come from this fund. As it stands now, we pay these obligations as we go. So we have actually every year
You
a
can't
huge
pay
chunk.
more than that's in the fund, so I don't know that you can make the ironclad statement that it's, I mean, it might be the first choice until the fund exceeds the obligation. You can't, I don't think, make that judgment, but
Well, I'm not sure what you're getting at there, but, right, I don't think we're talking about the same thing. The money that we pay right now out of our budget, right now, like last year, the year before, we made payments as we went towards these obligations. That funding now is going to come out of here, right?
Correct.
So that portion
the
of our
first
budget,
stop.
which was $1 million or so.
Right.
Right, they'll stop coming out of our budget.
no, it won't. If the obligation exceeds the amount here, you have
Depends
to
on,
pay it.
right, it depends on what the payment is going to be. You may not have enough in this fund early on, but right now, you're doing what probably 95% of municipalities do in the state is, you pay as you go, and you kick the can down the road a little bit more, and you try to catch up. But
Right, but so under this scheme, moving forward, we're not going to be doing that. We're not going to be paying out of our general fund anymore. We're going to be funding this with wherever we decide to take that revenue from, and we're going to be making those payments out of this instead of our general fund.
It's not
Is that
entirely
right?
accurate. If if your payment exceeds what's in the trust, you have to fund it. Now, you could go through the mechanics, I guess, of putting it into the trust and then pulling it out after, but the
Which is what we will be
But
doing.
it's still coming from
Yeah,
the general
it-
fund, right? This is going, this will be a pass-through, correct? If there's insufficient funds, we will pass funds from the general fund into this and then pay our obligation from this. Is that correct?
The goal here is that we do at least the pay-as-you-go funding that we currently do, and hopefully we get to a point where we actually do fund it on an actuarial basis, and that in fact the fund will be able to carry the liabilities in out years.
So may I just get an answer to that question? I didn't hear the answer. So are we would pass through,
from the general fund.
yes, into
But-
this fund, and then all of our obligations would be met through this fund?
That's the goal, but you're also looking at maybe employee contributions, you're looking at other sources of funding this trust, other than just general fund.
Very good.
So, I mean, there's other, but, Kevin's right, if the obligation is insufficient to be paid out of the trust, you're going to have to, general fund's going to have to pass it through to pay that obligation.
Bill, is that how you would implement it? Is you would, instead of paying directly from the general fund, you would just run the contribution from the general fund into this as a pass-through? Is that how you would envision doing it?
Yes, the accounting treatment would be similar to how we do the pension, which is just that. I mean, through the, on the pension side, it happens through the MMO. We adopt a specific amount. Those revenues are recorded in the general fund.
Does the trustee get a fee tied to the assets in the fund?
We are the trustee.
We are the trustee,
Yeah,
so we're the only, so there's nobody, who's making the investment decisions?
There's the pension committee that is made up of members from the board, members from participants, as well as the administration. And the committee retains a investment advisor who
And
advises.
they're not paid on the basis of any kind of assets accumulated?
They are paid on a basis point of assets, yes.
So if you run it through, if you run, say, for example, this
I'm
past
talking
through-
pension now, because there is no assets for OPEB.
But I'm
Yeah.
I'm specifically talking about this trust fund.
Okay.
Are there, is there anybody being paid a fee based on the assets in this trust fund? Once we set it up?
Yeah, the only fees would be those paid to any kind of investment advice that the township receives.
But it's not tied to the assets then? Or is it? This is what I'm getting at. If you run the general fund payments through the pension fund for purposes of doing this, and it affects the asset base upon which somebody gets paid, then you're artificially inflating their fee because it's just a pass-through and they're not really doing any kind of investment. And that's
Yeah, I see your point, yes.
And that's what I'm trying to understand.
To the extent we're on a pay-as-you-go basis, there will be little to no fees because the money will be deposited into the trust and then immediately paid for to provide the health care coverage. So there will be no assets to be invested.
So you basically would pay it in on a sort of a monthly basis or a quarterly or an as-needed basis?
For the time being, it would have to be monthly at the same frequency that the medical bills are due.
Right, so that's how you would operationalize it?
Yes.
You wouldn't put it in January at the beginning of the year and then have it sit there and draw down on it because of the fact that the advisor who's getting a fee tied to the assets would artificially get a higher basis of assets then.
Yeah, the only way that would make sense is if we were able to achieve some sort of return while the money is sitting in that fund for the months that it's, so for the payments that are due in November or December, if you get them in January, you're able to get some return on those from January through September, October to help offset the cost of how much is needed in the later months. Those kind of analysis and those kind of decisions haven't been made yet because we're still not entirely sure on the funding mechanisms.
Yeah, I understand. I just don't want us to...
Kevin, it might help to think of it in terms of the way we run the pension now. So when monies are put in the pension fund, if they're cash assets, we're not paying any fees on those
I'm more
cash
concerned
assets.
about the convenience of now this running. I'm okay with the fact you put money in today and it's exceeding and it's sitting there for a couple of years and they get their fee for investing it. My concern is if we're simply taking money and moving it from the left pocket to the right pocket through, because it's a general fund, for convenience of running it through this fund, and then the advisor has some kind of weighted average calculation that the assets that are sitting in there drive up his fee when they're not really invested or being managed. And I just want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, Bill, you could correct me, but I don't believe we pay any fees associated with cash on hand in the pension fund. But once those monies are invested in equities or mutual funds or other, that's when the fees start to accrue.
Depends on the way the agreement gets written.
Yeah, but that,
The agreement will be set up in a similar fashion as pension,
right.
and that's how
It's
the
modeled
pension
after
works.
You understand my point?
Yes, I absolutely understand.
And I have great faith in you. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse. You understand my point, you understand my concern, and I have confidence in you that you will make sure it's addressed appropriately.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
One question about the authority. So this is from your, Bill White, from your memo, page 1, where you say that the trust is irrevocable. But any subsequent board could undo this with a vote, correct? So we don't have the authority to bind the township beyond.
Correct.
Very good. So the irrevocability, it's only irrevocable until they pass a new ordinance that.
The township could take future action
Very good.
to unwind this,
Thank
correct?
you.
Which gets to my line of questions. Bill, is this more than anything more than a cosmetic change to what's going on? I mean, the township is a trustee, which is not the way you normally have a trust set up. You have the settlor, the grantor puts money into a trust, and then a third party handles that with a fiduciary obligation running back to the beneficiary. Here, we are the trustee of our own money, and our township manager is the administrator of that trust. Does any other commissioner feel that we should be talking about a third party here?
Maybe if I can just to chime in here, and they can disagree with me or correct me here. I think what this establishes here is a fund which the township now is recognizing that we have an unfunded liability that we have on our hands, to establish that we are making a commitment to correct this Because I believe actuarially, we're about 52 million unfunded liability. And probably on a cash basis, I think more like 100 million could be, or somewhere in that area. Okay. But this is establishing for the first time that we're going to start addressing these unfunded liabilities. And this is something that this board has recognized over the last few years. You have to start putting these monies aside. I think what John Rice had spoke about too, that we can't keep kicking the can down the road because it's only going to get worse. And I think with some of the contracts, I think with the FOP now there's contributions, those types of things are now starting to make those corrections. So, you know, this is something as a first step to be able to lock this in, that we are starting to put money aside, that we can't just make easy decisions to go ahead and push money aside, that we are starting to address these.
And Jim, let me just add that in the way I see this and the why this is important in my view, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we just continued to have it in our general fund and pay, you know, set it aside, and we couldn't invest it the way we can in this type of an account and make money on it. And it's our goal that we're going to build up a fund here, a sizable fund that we could make money on, which will help our burden. And if we just leave it commingled in our general fund and pay out of that, we can't do that. So in my opinion, I would like to see this grow and grow exponentially from its own corpus. And I don't think we can do that if we leave it commingled in our general fund.
Well, also, I thought part of the idea was we put this fund together and we have already made policies about how we're going to add money to it until at some point we're going to cover the unfunded portion. From that time forward, the only money we're going to put in is any money that would have accrued by the employees working that year for their future benefit. So I think you have to have the long view when you discuss this.
I also think that, you know, at a certain point in time, if the fund gets big enough, Jim, you'll bring in a professional.
Oh, then we should look at a separate trustee and the whole nine yards.
I think in the early stages, we're probably okay.
Bob, or Bill, you mentioned a committee. Was that in reference to the pension?
Yes.
Okay, because in Article 3 of the trust, I guess it's the trust agreement, we're our own investment advisor. Are we all comfortable with that? That this is Article 302 of the, it's called the Integral Part Trust.
Yeah, and then what I would foresee happening here, and it's the same as what the township has done with the pension, is that they delegate that authority then through the hiring of a third-party investment advisor. So it's not John Rice and I making the decisions on the investments. It goes through the committee at the advice of a paid third-party investment advisor.
Okay. Well, I think we'll just have to wait and see how well we do with building up the, as Elaine says, the corpus, and maybe we'll have a problem that we really want, and that is money that we need help with in making decisions about.
So I'll just make a brief comment. I remember bringing this issue up with Dave Bayshore, the former manager, and I asked him how much the unfunded liability was for accrued time off and so on and so on. And we've come so far from where we were just 4 or 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I had to dig around in the basement of the building to find the financial documents to find out what the liabilities were, the unfunded liabilities. On our books at the time, we showed, I forget the exact number, I'll say 60 million of debt, but we didn't show 240 million of OPEB liability and other things. So this administration and this board has done a lot of work in the last 4 years to not only recognize that we need to have these numbers in front of us all the time to make good decisions. 5 years ago when I came on the board, we hired someone. I thought it was costing $70,000 to hire someone. I come to find out now that it's $170,000. So by having this fund, by setting the money aside, it forces legislators like ourselves to not spend money wildly, to say, look, Here's the real budget. Here's the real cost. We have to set this money aside. We have to think twice about giving pay raises in down years and give pay raises when we can afford to. But it's a method of accounting. It's a method of responsibility. So even though this adds layers of complexity in some ways, it really holds, it's really more about us than you. I hate to be that way, but it's about keeping us honest, keeping us recognizing the reality of cost, keeping us responsible to those who we've made promises to, because this is a lot about promises that have been made over the last 35 years, 40 years. What this board, by enacting something like this, is saying is we accept those responsibilities. We will do everything in our power to fund those responsibilities. And the legacy we leave for future elected officials is that they will see it too, that they can't claim, oh, I didn't know about that. You know, here it is. There's an actual dedicated fund. So from my point of view, I've been asking for something like this from administration since 2007, end of 2007. Our administration has done a great job. The CARFAC. Bill, you've done a lot of work on this. All I can tell you is I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that we'll be able to put money aside. If we're going to keep making promises, then we have to set money aside for those promises, just as we do in the pension fund. This is the vehicle. The GFOA supports this. This is the mechanism. This is the right way to do this. So in my opinion, I'm very happy. This is a very happy moment for me. You know, it only took 4 years, but if Bill wasn't here and Bob, it would have taken 10. So thank you to both of you. That said, I think the comments that you've all raised are important ones. You know, are we adding too much complexity? If we're already fiduciaries, if we're already trustees, why do we need to do this again? It does make sense. The same reason why we have pension committee meetings that meet quarterly, and that we have more eyes looking at the numbers. It reduces the chance of malfeasance. It reduces the chance of errors. It reduces the chance of mistakes. So I appreciate the mechanism. So thank you.
I just want to take a moment and talk about the money that's going to go in this fund. So we have right now ready to feed into this fund $1.8 million, which was our excess from 2011. It's now 2013. Do you have an estimate of our 2012 payment that will go in?
I do. I have the information as of the balance sheet date. So this is the total number. This is the 11 excess plus the 12.
Okay.
And it's $3,022,470. Those are in our draft balance sheets that we're working with our auditors on finalizing as I speak. So I don't suspect that those will change materially between now and when our financial statements are published, but those
Okay.
are the set-asides.
So we're starting this fund out with $3.2 million and some change that is solely from excess from our last two budgets.
Sorry, it's $3,022,000,
Okay.
not 3.2.
In addition to that, we will have whatever our pay-as-you-go that's budgeted every year to go into it next year. And most importantly, and which something that's a priority to me and I think this board, is that that's not enough, just our excess and our pay-as-you-go number. We need to come up with a formula, a policy, a plan, whatever you want to call it, of what else is going to go into this fund on an annual basis and where we're going to get that money. We don't have that tonight, but we're close. Our actuaries, Mock and Hopt, have come up with a draft of a way to fund this. Our CARFAC is looking at this very carefully. They're tweaking what we received from Mock and Hopt. And they will be presenting in connection with setting up this account, how it is we can feed the account, because this lovely fancy OPEB account is only as good as the money that we set aside to put into it. It doesn't do anything if we don't feed it. So I anticipate, and I hope that I'm telling the truth here, that in the next month or so we will have a draft policy or plan, or however you want to term it, to vote on how we are going to fund this every year in over and above the excess policy that we have now and the pay-as-you-go payments that we make already. So that is something to look forward to in the next month. All right.
If I could just add to that, just real briefly, is that to reassure you that we are working with the CARFAC group on that to achieve that goal. As I speak, in addition to we had 4 different numbers runs from Mock and Hop. We had gone back and asked them to run 4 additional ones. So we have no less than 8 different scenarios that we've asked them to run on models that we'll be going over the next few weeks. And then just to touch on the fund balance policy, which the board deserves a lot of credit for being on the front end of this, that was for 2011 and 12. So as of now, any excess fund balances moving forward, there is no policy. So part of what the options that are presented to the board will include some revision of that or some reintroduction or version of excess fund balance as well.
And just one more comment on that. I've said this before, but I like to repeat it again and again, that the big scary number that we have from Muck and Hopped about the liability that we have on this front is a number that looks out 75 years. So it looks at and includes what we will owe to our employees over the next 75 years. It's a long time. So the payment plan or the payment approach that we have to fund this is also going to be a long-term approach. And we're not going to be paying this off and fully funding it in the next 5 years. I think we've said that 1,000 times, but it bears repeating. This is very long-term, 75 years out. Some of these debts will be due. All right.
But to be fair, the unfunded net present value of the liability is what, $50 million, Bill?
52, according to the last actuarial report. Yeah.
So, I mean, to keep us, if we had the ability to keep us neutral today, we'd have to put in $50 million, $52 million.
Yeah, that assumes that we have that in our, yeah.
I have one more question. The $3 million that plus or minus that we're going to transfer this year, our pay-as-you-go payment will not be $3 million, correct? So consequently, that dilemma that Jim said we might have, I think we're going to have on day one. Correct? We're going to have a sizable amount of money in that fund, and we're going to start needing to make the particular decisions about managing it very, very soon.
Yes, well, provided the board authorizes the transfer of those funds and we take the next step to actually move them over, yes. And I think that'll be addressed in what you see coming back from the CARFAC
Because the
group.
pay-as-you-go won't be, for this year, won't be $3 million.
No, it's pay-as-you-go is roughly, in round numbers, just about $1.5 million.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioner comment or questions?
Yep, I'll make a motion to
Mike.
approve 2013-06 and the introduction of it.
Second.
All right, is there any more staff comment on this?
Yes, Madam President, real quick, this is subject to our annual audit, this fund. And if, I know the board is aware, but if the public's not aware, as part of the audit process, as they review, the auditors do meet with the CARFAC group separate of staff. They also meet with the commissioners separate of staff. So again, there are more eyes without staff being involved. So in case there is any issues or questions about how things are being handled financially, those options are being looked at without staff in the room, that those questions can be raised and pursued.
Thank you. All right, is there any public comment on this ordinance introduction? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes 7-0.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2013-69, approving the disposition of specific township records. There's a list of finance and administrative records, police records, community development records that I guess we've been retaining beyond the requirements. So, Bill, I don't really have a problem in general with this concept, but there were a couple of things that had me a little concerned, and you can, if you give me the assurance that we have the necessary records, then I'll feel better. Given that we have the accumulated leave balances, and that's tied to payroll, and then we have something here called quarterly payroll journals, are we going to have the records to confirm, verify that outstanding balance that we would owe to people as they leave? Do we hold on to?
On those specific ones, what we'll do is, I believe the answer is yes, but I don't want to commit to that right now. So if the answer is no, that we need those documents to verify that, they will not be destroyed. But we'll get that answer tomorrow.
The other one that gave me a little bit of a concern was, I know that in the past there's been many questions around large expenditures, in particular this building, and people, it's quieted down, but people every once in a while say, how much did you spend, how much did this, and many of these checks and payment records seem to fall in a time period that there may capture some of the records associated with that. Will we have something available if somebody wants to look at that, to do research on that?
Yeah, these represent the paper copies. We have our software database, which goes back to 1999, but I think the township started on it full time in 2000.
So you're just destroying the copy of the check that came back from the bank?
Yes. We have the electronic records.
And I'm okay, and I make a motion to approve Resolution 2013-69.
Second.
Just a quick question, and kind of on the same thought process. I looked at the retention, and again, you're using a schedule I think the state has provided as guidance. I'm looking at it from in terms of prosecuting malfeasance within the statute of, say, 5 years, and then they generally allow that to be extended to 7 years if malfeasance is discovered. And I look at the list, and I'm looking at some of these financial records that are just a few years retention time. My only question is, do we scan, like, scan and PDF any of the paper records, and is there a plan to do that, and is there a methodology of that? And is there a way that we could, in fact, retain records for a longer period of time? I know we want to shred paper and get rid of the paper, but before it's shredded, is there any plan to scan that documentation?
At this time, there is not.
There's not.
Not with regard to the financial records. And I guess that to answer the second part of the question about can we extend the life or not destroy some of those, the answer is absolutely. If the board says so, or wants to change the retention schedule to be longer than what the state limits or provides, I think that's entirely within the board's purview.
I like just one example. We currently have one of these lines is 2003 cash receipts. We still have those, I assume, which is, that's we're talking 10 years of retention. That's phenomenal. That would be great, but we don't have room to keep things that long. And obviously we want to shred those. But moving forward, the retention schedule says only hold on to this for 3 years. But the criminal statute of financial theft is at least 5 years, could be longer. And my problem is by shredding something like that, especially, I'm just using that as one example, that if we were to discover a theft many years after the fact and we don't have the paper records, we can't prosecute. So I would argue that, and I would leave it up to your office's decision of how long you want to keep things and how you want to keep them. Keeping the paper versus scanning it, having a system that allows us to do that. I don't know if we had the hardware to do that or the manpower to do that, but maybe it's a matter of before it's thrown into the trash, it's scanned. I don't know. But again, maybe if you would want to just look at that more closely, and you can understand where my sensitivity is coming from, but I was quite frustrated to not have certain documents when I needed them a few years ago. So if you will consider that, I appreciate it.
Okay, is there any other comment or question from the commissioners or from staff? Is there any public comment on this?
Hi, Jim Schneller. I was wondering if you could table this while these questions were being looked into. I question the hurry, if there is any. I question why there would be any rush, especially with all the room we have. And I remind you that the documents that we have really are a type of investment. They can have returns of all sorts. has been mentioned by some of you. So as long as townships put the money into keeping records, there's a return, feasible return. So you're justified in taking a careful look at this. I know that rapid scanners are really inexpensive now, and one employee in one day can scan thousands of documents for not much money. I mean, they're the size of a laptop. And if I could ask a specific question to the board, on the only page for Community Development Department, when it says licensing, what does that mean? What is the definition of a licensing document?
Kevin. Commissioners, I believe that refers to the contractors that are licensed through the department.
So that would be applications and such,
Be licenses.
or just the licenses? With 7 years, I can't make a big complaint. Thank you. The next page, however, on police, if you look at PO 10, midway down the page, the daily activity records, I think, have similar reasons to be kept around. And since it's in the name of police activity, which involves personal rights and citizens, and of course criminal activity, I think maybe 5 years or 10 years. Could you please make that change? I'm just talking about daily activity records.
It's my understanding that these are paper records that are the daily activity records are in the computer as well. Most of these things are, as I understand it. So what this retention policy is referring to is getting rid of paper copies.
Well, please take a careful look and don't jump into it. They are important.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
The last item on the agenda in Finance and Audit is a motion to approve a business tax settlement 2013-05 in the amount of $26,000. So I make a motion to approve the settlement.
Second?
Any commissioner comment or staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, Public Works and Engineering with Commissioner Jim Higgins.
We have one item that was on the consent agenda and that we'll now take up. Well, before we do that, let's take up resolution number 2013-71. This is to authorize the purchase. I'm sorry, it's awarding a contract for seed and fertilizer. And this is under Kevin Kochanski's,
No.
Steve Orsini, sorry. Do you have anything to add to this, Steve?
This is an annual purchase that we go to sealed bid for, and it's used throughout the year. It'll be specifically used heavily this fall, but it's nothing, it's a very standard bid, and it's an annual bid.
And it's it's organic, non-synthetic.
That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay.
All right, I'll move passage of the resolution.
Second?
Any commissioner or staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
The next item is resolution for approval of new land development by 615 Newtown Road, LP, a sewage facilities planning module. And what we would want to do here is, well, I'll move its introduction.
Approval.
I'll move its passage.
Second?
And Steve, do you want to explain what this is all about?
Yes, Commissioner. As each subdivision or land development is approved, one of the final steps is securing their sanitary sewer capacity. So the Township's Act 537 plan has to be amended to reflect the new connections. And that's what this ordinance will be attached to the sewage facilities planning module with all the required documents by the Department of Environmental Protection. This will be sent off to them for their review, and comment. And once passed, it will enable 615 Newtown LLC the ability to build their homes and then connect to the sanitary sewer.
Okay. Are we okay with the wording on the now therefore clause?
Yes, that's DEP is kind enough to provide a sample ordinance, which is what this is. But in future ones, I can add to that, as you pointed out to me. I can make those changes.
Okay.
Any other commissioner comment or questions, staff? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
That's all I have under public
Now we
works.
have
One more.
the
Gilmore
Glenbrook.
Associates, number J.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, this was taken off the consent agenda, and it's to authorize Gilmore and Associates to prepare, design, bidding and permit documents for a dedicated left-hand turn signal at the intersection of County Line Road and Glenbrook Avenue, which is the 5 Points intersection. So I will move the passage of the ordinance, or the resolution.
Second. Now, do you want me to give you a real brief? Ever since 5 Points was fixed up, there's been, a matter of fact, even before we formally dedicated, there's been an issue with this intersection. For people who are westbound on County Line and want to make a left-hand turn into Glenbrook, the position of the signals for the traffic heading eastbound is right at that intersection. But the people going westbound don't know what signal the other folks have. So normal, and the issue comes up is a lot of times it's a red signal, so you can easily make that left turn. Since before we dedicated this, we started receiving complaints. We talked at staff traffic about it. The police themselves have had problems. Public Works has reported that they've had issues there. We've only had one accident there, so we've been lucky in that regard. So
it would be traffic going westbound thinks that it has the right of way.
They don't know.
And
period.
they cut right in front of eastbound traffic.
Well, you
which,
just take a guess.
Which has a green light.
Yeah, you're taking a guess as well.
I do.
No,
You take
it
a
might be a
guess.
red light. See, that's the problem, Jimmy. You don't know. And some of the things that this has caused are people that actually go down Glenbrook, which is a one-way street, the wrong way to get to the medical offices that are there because they're afraid of that intersection. We've had other people who go a little further down and cut through Dr. Lou's parking area at his building because they feel that's safer. So anyway, this is to do the studies and the prep work. This is not to fund the actual installation, which we still have to work on the funding for that.
I have a couple. It says here, whereas it has been determined. Who made the determination? In the second
I'm sorry.
In the second whereas clause, it says, whereas it has been determined. Because it's not clear on everything I see here that staff traffic says this is needed.
Actually, it has been determined, as Commissioner Nagel stated, through staff traffic, through staff. And when I was reviewing the 5 Points intersection, going through those notes, it was very specific that they knew there was an issue at this intersection, and they said it would be addressed later. And again, through staff traffic, through my own experience, I even contacted PennDOT, and Ashwin Patel provided a schematic. Again, I think further verifying the need for this signal of this type at this intersection. So I could tell you staff traffic and staff have determined.
Then my next question, it says this project was not included in the 2013 portion of the capital 5-year plan. So if we've known about this for a while, why wasn't it captured somewhere in the capital plan?
It's shown in further out years, but we've been having more issues with.
So when you say not 2013, you mean it's like in 14, 15, or 16?
It's one of the outlier years.
Gotcha. But you wouldn't probably, even if you started your design work, you probably couldn't get this installed this year anyway.
I guess it's going to depend. I mean, Amy Kaminsky will do a great job. It's really going to depend on PennDOT and their timeline getting responses.
Based on your experience. Do you think this
I don't think it's going to be a problem. We're probably going to hit like a fall construction is what we could probably end up doing here.
And Bill, do you have funds if we were able to do this year?
Well, what'll end up happening if it's in one of the out years in the capital plan is it'll be pushed up to this year. We'll use the cash, the excess cash that's in basically use the cash balance in the capital fund this year, and then in some future year, all things being equal, the capital fund will reimburse itself by not having the project in that year.
We also have 1 year after it's permitted by PennDOT to construct it, so there is some
It's been
leeway on
longer
there.
than that.
No, we don't have the design done, but once PennDOT approves it and signs it,
Oh, okay.
then we have a year from that point to
Right.
construct it.
And
So we
Kevin,
do
for
have-
example, I'm going to ask Lower Merion to fund part of it, because this should have been part of the original construction of the 5 points.
Well, why wouldn't we just wait till that gets resolved before we commence the design work then?
My recommendation would be to move forward on the design. I think that's needed, and based on Amy Kaminsky's statement that we have a year to hold off, $13,000 is a considerable sum of money, but it's not the construction portion. My suggestion to the board would be to get the engineering done, and then if we do decide to approach the adjacent township for that financing, we have time to do that. But we can also go to them with a plan that's
Can I
complete.
pick on your word for a second, Steve? Is it your recommendation or your suggestion?
It is my recommendation and suggestion, sir.
That's a
I'll just quick comment that the cars, they would be in the left lane westbound. That's the Lower Merion side of the street. John has already said that he will be going to Lower Merion, but I think we really do need Lower Merion to get on board with us here.
Once you go through the light, you're in Radnor. No.
I'm sorry, Bryn Mawr Hospital
it's
is
Lower
part of Radnor Township or not?
It's the Lower Merion side of the street.
It's County Line Road, so the center line of the road north is Lower Merion.
Right.
Center line of the road south. No, but this would be the left turning. This would be the left turn on County Line onto Glenbrook.
The fixture will physically be located in Lower Merion. So
because
we will, I've already talked to Zelov about it, the commissioner over there.
No,
The problem is in Radnor.
No, but the traffic is actually on the Lower Merion side of the road.
Yes, it is.
The fixtures in Lower Merion, do we even have the ability to do this? I mean, do we have the
Well,
ability to install something?
We
in
were
their town?
we were partners with Lower Merion on this, and the hospital as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
co-funded.
understand if they agree.
It's a state highway.
But wait, the cars are turning onto the Radnor Township side of the road, so it's a.
Well, I would imagine the engineering
road.
report will tell us
State
that.
road.
We've
State
actually
road
had,
separate.
we have had discussions with their traffic engineer, and I'm not sure what the financial obligations are, but I do know that they are on board with the design as we had been discussing it. So they're aware of it. Their traffic engineer supports what we're doing here, and they understand what the problem is. However, I don't know what the financial obligation would be.
Okay.
So-
Is there any
so
other
They wouldn't be
commissioner
opposed to
comment?
us installing it if we paid for the whole thing in their township.
Absolutely.
Any other commissioner comment? Any staff or public comment?
Well, just, that's it, since,
Come on, Jim, you don't know anything about this.
since this is really a PennDOT responsibility, but financially under state law, we have to pay for it, we ought to, are we thinking about getting Lower Merion to pay half of this? Was that what we were covering? Okay. That's all.
Okay, public comment?
Hi, Jim Schneller. Just in the name of efficiency, I wanted to point out there is nonstop jaywalking at that light because there's people getting off at the Route 100 stop, and they're heading for downtown Bryn Mawr. They don't want to walk up to the Bryn Mawr Avenue. So if you could include that in your equation, there's no crosswalk right now at Glenbrook.
There's a crosswalk at Lindsay with a command button on it.
Correct.
Lindsay up by the hospital.
We cannot put
By the
a
cancer center.
But people by natural inclination are crossing.
There's a pathway that leads them there. You can only do so much.
We cannot
No, I mean,
put
if
a
you-
pedestrian,
yeah.
excuse
Sorry.
me, Jim, we cannot put a pedestrian crossing at that intersection because the westbound movement never stops.
Right.
Except when,
No,
When
it
Bryn
never
Mawr-
stops. It's a constant
Right.
green at that intersection.
I assume.
And
this
our
might be
signals will
stopping.
reflect that, and we cannot, because I thought the same thing, and when I went out, I realized that we cannot stop that traffic because it'll spill over into the back intersection.
We could get, Jim, you want to be a crossing guard? Maybe
Love to.
deputize you.
And what a great intersection.
All right, thank you.
The initial thing I wrote down was, if you could look at the Bryn Mawr intersection, it's too short. You can't cross Haverford Road, County Line Road, in the time they offer. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Amy is actually looking at that entire intersection, so that'll include the cross time on the walks.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, Community Development with Commissioner Curley.
I move the approval of HARB 2013-08 for 214 East Beatree Lane.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Any staff or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I move the approval of HARB 2013-09 for 424 Chestnut Lane.
Second?
Any commissioner or staff comment?
Kevin, I mean, is this real that if they wanted to put a new door on their house, they had to run this through HARB?
When you are altering the location or the size, yes, that HARB ordinance would
back
be
of their
applicable.
house?
Yes. It depends on how the back is viewed and if it's viewed from an adjacent street. The HARB
So
ordinance
is this
would
like a
require
corner
that.
property?
It doesn't necessarily need to be a corner property,
How
but
would
if
you
you
view the
can.
back of somebody's house?
It
from
is a corner
adjacent?
property.
It is?
Yes.
Any other commissioner or staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I move the approval of HARB 2013-10 for 321 St. David's Road.
Second?
Any commissioner comment, staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I move the approval of HARB 2013-11 for 132 East Beech Tree Lane.
Second?
Any commissioner or staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Public safety? No report.
Library, any report?
No report. No report.
Public health?
No report.
All right. Do we have any old business?
Well, I don't know if this is old business, but did we get the staff traffic committee report for April before us? Does anybody recall?
I haven't seen it
I
yet.
haven't seen it.
That normally would come up.
It comes
to
in
us.
when we get all the reports.
Well, we get that one separately by email. Staff traffic.
No, the only thing we get by email is the upcoming agenda. It's usually in the packet with all the different departmental reports.
Well, Jim, would you like to request that we?
Well, I just was, our chief isn't here tonight, and I was wondering, Bob, would you know what's happened on that?
I will check and see on that. I'm not sure whether or not they skipped the April meeting or not, but we will verify this and get the information
There
out.
was an April meeting, and
Okay.
there was.
Actually, the 5 Points intersection was discussed at the April meeting. Commissioner
Yeah.
Nagel and myself were
And there was a
were
parking ordinance for Pennsylvania Avenue, too.
I have one piece of old business. I brought this up at our last regular meeting. The rock slope. We have the $10,000 funding from the state. Bob, would someone in your office or yourself or someone contact Greg Vitale's office and see if there's any way we can use that funding for some other improvement? Maybe buying a number of trees for either Clemacrone Park or the rock slope somewhere. Just find a way to spend that money for a good purpose in that area, because it doesn't. We're up against a lot of issues at that site, especially with all the PICO work that's going on. They're still running some very heavy equipment through there. But if there's any way we can capture that funding and use it for some beautification in the area, that would be appreciated.
We will follow up on that, and I'll ask Steve. We'll make sure we take a look at this.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other old business? There are 2 items here of new business, and I'm assuming Mr. Zinkowski has something to share on these issues.
I think on the first one, I'll let Commissioner Curley speak on the first one. I know
Sure.
he's been in
I've had
contact with
a
residents.
handful of residents talk to me about a concern that they have that Mainline Health is moving some of its cardiology services from Bryn Mawr Hospital. So it's suggested, I think it's a good suggestion, I'd like to do it, that we task the Board of Health to hold some kind of meeting to examine this, to make a recommendation to us about the nature of that, whether that's a good decision in the best interest of the community, and then we would take that and forward it to the authorities at Bryn Mawr Hospital.
So practices are leaving? Or is
Yes.
it- Mhm.
They're
Yes.
talking about shifting the cardiology to Lankenau.
And I don't know which ones, and I don't think we need to discuss that tonight. What I think we should do is create a venue for those that want to voice their opposition to that to come forward, and for the Board of Health to examine the impact of that decision on the community, and then we can make a decision based upon what the Board of Health recommends.
And a similar thing happened 6, 8 years ago. And at that time, Board of Health did get involved, and they didn't move them.
Yes, and I've been contacted by several people who have told me that if we create a venue, there will be great support in the community to come out and speak against the removal of that service.
Okay,
Do we
should
know
we
what the
be making
service
a
they're
motion to
removing
put this
is?
on the agenda, or?
No, we just sent it.
Of
If
the
we can,
Board
if
of
we could
Health?
if the board could just make a motion to authorize a letter to be sent to them, we'll make a motion, we'll ask the Board of Health to look at this. Maybe at the same time, we'll also extend an invitation to Bryn Mawr Hospital also.
Okay,
But
would
I'd
you
like
like
to know
to?
what services are being moved. Is it open
Yeah.
heart surgery? Is it cardiac catheterization?
We will,
I have no idea
we will
what
get
it
all that
is.
information.
All right, Don, would you make a
So
motion?
I make a
to that
motion
end?
that we task the Board of Health to have a public meeting, and they examine the impact of the removal of cardiology services at Bryn Mawr Hospital, and then to make a report back to us on what that impact would be.
Second.
All right, is there any other commissioner comment on that? Any staff or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Okay, the next item is about SEPTA cameras.
Yes, in working with our police department and our detectives and speaking with them with a lot of the burglaries that have been taking place around the township, a question was asked of looking at trying to capture images from cameras that may be at the SEPTA stations where it seems as though there is easy access in and out of the township. The detectives had informed me that there are no cameras at any of the stations within the township, which is problematic. The question was asked if there are other areas, which I believe they are in the city. This is something that I think is critical to the safety of our residents in this area, those who utilize the trains. To be able to have that type of camera, I think, will also provide a huge amount of benefit and protection, not only to the SEPTA users, but also give us an opportunity to be able to view images and try to connect individuals at certain times with the trains to be able to help in the arrest of these individuals. So it's something that I know the detectives were very supportive of, that this was being brought to the agenda tonight. We'd ask the board to make a motion to authorize a letter to be sent to them with follow-up by our police department to see what we can do to get these cameras installed here in Radnor Township.
Do you know if there are cameras on any other R5 stations along the main line?
I think from our end, from what I understand, there aren't. So I don't know if there's a difference of whether or not it's on the main line. It's not required, but it would seem as though it would be an automatic fit. I know I was very surprised, especially after 9/11, that security, especially in the areas of transportation and trains, that these would be something that would be an automatic along this whole route. But here I think it has exposed itself that we believe that there's access, and some of these burglaries that have been taking place are utilizing the trains. And to not have that is very, I think, surprising to us. That's not there.
I was able to actually get a tour of the SEPTA command center, and they have maybe as many as 1,000 cameras on their lines. They monitor station platforms, especially during events and whatnot. I think it's within their capacity to do this, so I think this is a good idea. So I think it's just asking, if the need is here, maybe they can do it. So.
Then why don't you go ahead and make a
I'll
motion?
move requesting SEPTA to place security cameras on train station platforms throughout Radnor Township.
And let's be clear, this isn't just the R5. It's Norristown High-Speed Line also.
Yeah, I need a
that.
second. You have a second?
Second.
Any commissioner comment or staff comment? Public comment?
John Rice, yeah.
Madam Chairwoman, John Osborne, Treasurer. Am I interrupting somebody?
John, a question,
Go
but you
ahead.
can go first, John.
All right. I just want to make a few comments. I want to remind the residents that May 21st is the primary day, and in connection with the primary, there'll be the referendum from the Charter Review Commission, and there'll be 4 questions there. It's open to all registered voters in Radnor to vote on the referendum questions.
John, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are voting on the SEPTA cameras.
Oh, I'm
Can you
sorry.
hold your comments until we finish with that vote, and then?
Certainly.
Okay.
Kevin had a comment.
John, right, so I'm sort of torn on that one. I mean, I understand the benefit, but at the same point in time, it's a rather slippery slope to start putting cameras. Because then you start putting them everywhere.
It's
and then
not
all
a
this-
slippery slope to put
That's
them
your-
anywhere. It's for the protection of the residents. It's
That
not a
is-
slippery slope,
Bill,
Kevin.
I'm entitled to my opinion. Stop
I know, and I'm
interrupting.
trying to tell you, it's not a slippery slope.
Well,
Bill, let him say his piece.
then you start talking about putting cameras everywhere, and then you're.
Well, there already are 1,000, according to John Fisher,
Yeah, I understand.
on SEPTA's system. So we've had half a dozen burglaries
Yeah,
right
believe me, I
in the
understand.
first ward in the last 3 weeks.
How do you draw a line when it's going too far? Or is that just a matter of opinion?
It's
You
a
have to
matter
be
of
able to get it funded.
I mean, it's a
Ask
matter
John
of,
Rice the question.
it's a matter of opinion, but cameras were used up in Boston pretty successfully.
Yeah.
Were they street cameras or were they business cameras?
They were-
Security cameras on private property?
They were, my understanding is they were in businesses, but they were, facing the street. They were picking people up.
You as a business
and-
can put a security camera yourself.
I mean, a train station, to me, is a pretty obvious place to have security cameras, especially if the police have some information or concern that it's
I
being.
mean, here I'm pretty okay with it, but
Yeah.
my concern is, where does it, okay, here it's in this train station, then it's at the center of Wayne, and it's at the center of Glen Mary Road, and where does it all end?
It all starts with funding. And you can't get the funding unless the public wants you to spend the money, Kevin. So if there's an outcry, you won't get the funding.
Okay, I'm going to invite the public to make comment. This
Can
is
I
on,
make-
this, we're still on the vote for
Oh,
the
I'm
SEPTA
sorry.
cameras.
Sarah Pilling from 29 Garrett Avenue. I know that this is absolutely important. The Garrett Hill Station is about as isolated as you can come, and there is no one who will stay down there and wait for a train in the dark. And there is literally no way to contact anybody if you have an emergency. I think they're in every subway station, and we definitely need them at all Route 100s and all R5s. I understand about the robberies, but let me tell you, there are lots of break-ins at Radnor House in the cars, and it's very obvious. They come off the trolley, they do what they're doing, and they go back on the trolley. And we need this kind of supervision. It protects the neighborhood as well as the people who are standing there. Thank you for putting this forward, because it's really important.
Thank you. Okay, any other public comment on that issue? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. All right, it is now time for public participation. Mr. Osborne.
I have one other item under new
Oh,
business.
sorry.
Marty mentioned earlier about the Delaware County Veterans Memorial dedication. I don't know whether Radnor Township has ever made a contribution to this, but I really think we ought to consider it. And it doesn't have to be large. They have a program where you purchase bricks. And it seems to me that we should make a donation to this, and I'd like to move that we do that in the amount up to $500.
What is the organization, John?
Delaware County Veterans Memorial.
They're still actively raising money for that?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll
John,
second it.
Yeah, but there are 100 organizations we can make a donation to. For you just to come up and say make a donation, I could come up with 100 organizations worthwhile to make a donation to. This is taxpayers' money, John. If you want to make a contribution, make a contribution. But we shouldn't be just coming up and saying, it's a very worthy cause, but why not make a donation to the Wayne Legion? Why not make a donation, to the cemetery fund? Let's make a donation, because it's taxpayers' money.
I'm making this motion because I believe in supporting our veterans and honoring the veterans that are the reason that we're even sitting up here tonight being able to discuss
I
this.
believe that too, and that's you should make a personal contribution then.
John, can you give us more, maybe at the next meeting, give us more information on the
Sure.
memorial?
Be glad to.
Oh, yeah, you can't.
Okay.
Make sure it's on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Any other new business? Now it's time for public participation. Mr. Osborne.
Just a minute.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruptions. First, I would like to say that we have the primary election on May 21st, and it's everybody is eligible voters to vote on the referendum, which will be on a separate ballot, a separate voting machine. I also want to comment that May 31st is coming up, and that is the last day to pay your taxes, your real estate tax, for the face amount. After May 31st, a 10% penalty is assessed. So it behooves everyone to try and get that payment in by the end of this month. I personally endorse the referendum questions, and particularly the question that deals with the Treasurer's office. Thank you.
Is there any other public participation?
Can I ask the board, please, have you passed the ordinance that redid the sidewalk dining requirements in Radnor Township?
Yes.
Because I was concerned that the Design Review Board has been very busy the past 2 meetings and with applications. And I was wondering, does anyone know were there a result? Or was it grandfathered as far back as maybe if someone filed an application with DRB? Because all of a sudden 8 applications popped up. I wanted to express concern that they might be trying to slip under the door.
Moving forward, Jim.
I believe the majority of the applications for outdoor dining, I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but I believe the majority, if not all of them, are as a result of the new ordinance being passed and new applications coming in under the new regulations.
Thank you.
Any other public participation?
By the way, just want to thank Kevin Kuchansky. He's come back to us, just was off serving our country with his reserve unit. And thank you for your service, Kevin.
Thank you.
And welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, any other public participation?
Move we adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.